Hey everyone, how's everybody doing? Gosh, I just can't get this microphone to work right. Everybody can hear me okay, I hope. Oh, it's really frustrating. Ever since some update last week, this microphone has just not been acting right. It's not the mic, it's the settings. They keep resetting down to like a low input, and then when I try to go live, I set it higher than it's very confusing. But anyway, I think I got the video right, and hopefully the audio sounds okay. Um, so let me see how everybody's doing. Wow, we got Richie Rich. How are you? Andreas, always good to see you, and Rob and Plato. Rick, how are you? And David Crooks, Grishka, Pause, Poscu, Poscu, Paul. Good, Peter. Hi. Wow, lots of people here today. That's great. I appreciate that. It's I'm just always amazed that every week, twice a week, you guys bother to tune in and see what's going on, and I'm always here to try to help you best I can. If you have any questions about the cameras, Olympus in particular, or photography, or if you just want to kind of chit chat and see what's going on, I think what I'll do today is I'll just spend the first part of the stream, just sort of chit chatting, and then we'll go into the photo reviews or photo critiques because I got about 7 or 8 of them came in. So looking forward to that. I only skimmed a few just before the stream, but there's some nice pictures in there this week, so that'll be fun. And wow, this week, gosh. I don't know what it is this week. I just have been having a hard time doing anything. I've been so unproductive this week. Just not even watching anything on TV. Just having the news on in the background and skimming the forums and watching some YouTube videos. But not even that much. Just zoning out. I'm just so fatigued by this lockdown, and it's hard to get motivated to do anything. I was going to try and redo some of those shots I did. I did a video, you guys have probably seen it, where I compared all the different ISOs, and there was a lot of good comments in the comment sections in that video, and some very good points. But it's just a general test, right? I mean, the most common uh, comment was that I'm testing the Nikon D750 starting at ISO 200 against the Olympus, Micro Four Thirds at ISO 200, and theoretically, I'm actually underexposing the Nikon by one stop, trying to match the exposures, so that I really should have started at ISO 100 on the Nikon and compared against ISO 200 on the Olympus. But and I get that, because in theory, well, I not even in theory, but cameras, they have a native ISO, and that is the setting that the manufacturer believes is the optimal uh, setting for the sensor to capture the light. And then ISO is actually just sort of a artificial gain where it either amplifies a signal or does it digitally and changes the base of the exposure and just adds values and raises and brightens it up as you go through the ISO range. Because I think, I don't know, 5 or 6 months ago, Tony and a few others did an analysis of taking a shot at like ISO 100, underexposing at 5 stops, and then going into post processing and bringing it back up 5 stops, and then checking it there. And their argument was that uh, doing it that way is the same thing as raising the ISO on your camera. Hopefully I explained that exactly what they were doing. And I can see some truth to that, but it's not quite the same as raising the ISO in camera 5 stops versus take a picture at ISO 100 and raising it 5 stops in Lightroom or whatever software. Because the camera has, when you do it in camera, raising the ISO, and I'm ignoring cameras that have dual gain ISO circuits in them, which is a whole nother tech. But taking just a regular sensor without dual gain circuits in it, the camera is reading the image directly off the sensor and then processing the noise, right? First it amplifies it to whatever level is needed for the circuitry in the camera for the ADC converter, right? Analog to digital converter. And in that process, once it's converted to digital, then it goes through a process of eliminating noise, right? It does process raw images to some extent and applies their own color science and tone curves and everything else that makes their camera color science and image quality what it is. Versus if you take a picture at ISO 100 and import that into Lightroom and then raise it by 5 stops, Lightroom is not seeing all of. Sorry about that. I don't know where I left off. My whole computer just crashed for some reason. Oh, man. Looks like everybody left. There's just a handful of people still here. Anyway, I was talking about something, right? The But yeah, so yeah, the camera knows its own noise floor and the kind of noise that the camera has in camera. So when it does the raw processing, they have their own algorithm to try to eliminate that noise. So as you raise the ISO in camera, uh, it knows its own noise floor and has its own algorithm to specifically reduce that noise. Versus when you take a picture in the Photoshop or Lightroom at ISO 100 and raise it by 5 stops, uh, it doesn't have access to that raw data the same way the camera does, and therefore will not do as good a job at processing. And I saw another video where somebody tested Tony's theory and showed that the images are better when you raise the ISO in camera versus raising the gain in Lightroom. And it wasn't a huge difference, right? I mean, but there was some difference. Uh, so my goal was in that video was to try to match the exposures between the cameras, right? So that meaning I use the same shutter speed and aperture so that I have the same amount of light hitting the sensor per square millimeter, across the different cameras. Lens t-stop aside, there's some variance there because I wasn't using the exact same lens between, say, the Nikon and the Olympus, but between all of the Micro Four Thirds, the Panasonic and all the Olympuses, I was using the same lens, so that rules that variable out. But there's a slight difference. But anyway, the final image needed to be the same luminance or the same brightness between the Nikon and the Micro Four Thirds and the Fujifilm. And to achieve that same brightness, I have to adjust the ISO or the gain in the camera. Given the same shutter speed and aperture, all I'm doing is adjusting the gain. So it doesn't matter what that gain is between the 3 different cameras, right? I had to adjust it. So if I had taken the Nikon at ISO 100, it would have been significantly darker than the Olympus at ISO 200, given the same shutter speed and aperture. So I do have to increase the gain to achieve the same brightness in the image. And from that perspective, I think that was a fair comparison, right? And the other argument was if I had doubled the shutter speed, say the Nikon's at ISO 200, so I had to double my shutter speed to match the Olympus's shutter speed at ISO 200, that wouldn't have been a fair comparison because now I'm changing the signal to noise ratio of light hitting the sensor. I'm getting twice as much light onto the Nikon sensor because I have doubled the shutter speed. And that wouldn't have been a fair comparison either. So I think the way I did it was about as fair as you could make it without getting into trying to establish the base or true ISO of the camera, meaning it receives X amount of light and it produces X amount of image brightness. That kind of testing takes a lot more precision that I don't have, and the manufacturer theoretically is supposed to have done that for us, and there so that we have a common ISO setting across the cameras. They all calibrate them differently, but if a photographer picks up a camera and sets the ISO to 200 and the same shutter speed and aperture, they should get the same brightness no matter what camera they're using. That doesn't work out in practice, but that's how it's supposed to work, right? So the easiest way to do it was to compare all the cameras at the same ISO setting. And so I don't buy into the argument that I was underexposing the Nikon by a full stop versus the Micro Four Thirds. Because I'm achieving the same luminance into the final image across all the cameras, and that's what matters regardless of what the ISO setting is in the camera. But anyhow, if there's a hole in that theory or methodology, leave a comment on that video for me, because I'm open to learning more about how cameras handle exposure. But intuitively and anecdotally, that's how it worked in that testing. And every test that you see online, they always compare the cameras at the same ISO. And Fujifilm is constantly criticized for underrating their ISO, meaning if they say the camera's at ISO 800, they really mean it's at ISO 400, for example. I'm exaggerating a little. So they're saying that tests that you see in Fujifilm don't really reflect the camera's true noise in the camera because they're overinflating or overestimating the ISO, however you want to look at it. So they say, if you really want to compare Fuji, you need to raise the ISO and then compare the noise at these different ISOs. But again, the problem is not what you set the ISO at, it's what is the final luminance or brightness on the final image. Because every sensor is going to be sensitive, slightly differently than another camera. And that has a lot to do with all of the post-processing and circuitry in the camera, how much noise the camera generates internally. And a very easy analogy, I think, when you talk about noise in a camera is, when you listen to audio and you hear a hissing sound, that noise is not too dissimilar from the noise you get in a picture, right? Just in a visual form. And when they improve the circuitry in the audio signal, you get less hissing and less noise in the audio, and you get a very, very clean signal. And that's the goal of every camera manufacturer, is to have the lowest amount of internal noise in the camera, circuit noise. Every day. Why? Hold on, it's my mom. Hold on. Hello. Oh, can you bring it later? I'm in the middle of something now. Oh, all right. Okay, I'll be right. I'll be right out. Hold on. She She brought me some soup. I'll be right back, guys. I'm sorry. Let me uh let me get the soup. Give me about 1 minute. Okay. Man. Wow, it is hot. She gave me this she said she grew all this stuff in her garden. Probably not the tofu part, but you know, she'll just go in her yard and just start picking weeds and wash them and boil it and say, "Rob, I made some soup." And I keep telling her I don't like soup, you know? I said, "Mom, I don't like soup." I said, "If I want a hot drink, I'll just have some coffee or hot tea. Why why put crap in it and call it soup?" And it's pouring rain out. Anyhow, what the heck was I talking about? um, let me scroll up and see if there were any questions because I was jibber jabbering there for about 20 minutes and not really reading the comments. Uh, let's see. I'm having difficulty with focus stacking in Olympus workspace. I'm getting a lot of hazing in the final image. Um, I've never done the focus stacking in workspace. I think if the camera has the focus stacking ability like the M5 Mark II and so on, I guess workspace would offer that feature to stack in camera. So if your images look a little hazing, hazy is my guess is that you may want to try a different software other than workspace. It's probably not doing as good a job as a third party. So I would try Picolay, Picolay. It's free and it does a really good job. And try that software. And if the images are still hazy, then then you need to go back and look at the images individually. Now, if the images individually look good, possibly you need to use finer steps in the focusing. Uh, if that's an option, it depends how you do the focus stacking, because you're not getting enough sharp areas in the image to blend together to get a completely sharp image, and that might be what's causing it to be a little bit hazy. So try increasing the number of focus steps, and make sure that the range is also right. There's so many variables, right? It depends what lens you're using, and the distance of the object from the camera will determine how many steps are left. Because a lot of times people will start focusing, their focus point will be too far away or near where the infinity point of the lens is, and there won't be that many steps left, and hence you don't get too many sharp images. But in theory, you should have a pretty wide depth of field anyway, and you don't need the focus stack if you're focusing near the infinity level of the camera. But there's so many variables there that it's you have to kind of rule out things one by one. The first and easiest one would be to use Picolay and rule out the software, because I assume the individual images are looking good to you. You're just not sure why when you stack them they look kind of fuzzy. And they would look fuzzy if if it's the software. They might look fuzzy because the software is doing a bad job, or it's because you don't have enough fine steps in the focus stacking for the image to blend back together and look sharp. And Rick says, what you're saying about in-camera ISO on JPEG versus ISO raising in post doesn't really apply to raw images. Just that the metadata on the file tells Lightroom what to do. Okay, I'll have to give that some thought. I'm not exactly sure what you're trying to say there. Oh, Edian, how are you? Want to flip and twist, can't see that it is impossible. Oh, that's for Rob. I try to get hold of ETTR, but not working always. Maybe my own shortcoming, but I believe it depends on the scene. Yeah, ETTR is an interesting technique to try to expose everything to the right. So that's what ETTR stands for, expose to the right. The idea being is you want to capture as much data in the shadow area without clipping the highlights. And when you say it's not working always, what do you mean? Because typically with ETTR, the only thing you have to be careful of is not clipping the highlights. So what I like to do is I like to change the histogram settings in the camera, and it's purely superficial what you see on the back of the screen versus what you get in the final image. But I use the highlight and shadow clipping feature, but I adjust the uh, histogram settings in the camera to um, show those where things are clipping sooner, because when you expose to the right, you're pushing a lot of the highlights into an area where you're gonna lose highlight detail and colors and tones. So that's why I would say it's really a matter of um, picking your battles, right? Do you want shadow detail or do you want highlight detail? Because in a very high dynamic range scene, you're going beyond the limits of the cameras, so you have to kind of pick which area of the scene you want. And if you're trying to get it in one shot, now if you bracket, you can of course capture the 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 detail and information at at 3 or 4 different exposures, and then bring those back into a software and pick the areas that you want to retain. So an HDR shot, in other words. And you can do that without making it look too surreal. You can kind of do a good job with HDR now. Um, but yeah, ETTR it's not something I've ever done a video on because it's a little misleading in that you think you're going to be able to capture more detail and information, but while that's true, it's only a little bit. So the best thing to do really is to pick your battles and decide which area of the scene, if it's a high dynamic range scene, which area of the scene that you want to retain the detail, and then let whatever else clip, whether it's the shadows or the highlights. So if there's too many highlights clipping, then take less of that out of the scene. Like let's say it's a landscape and you have really bright skies. Well, it's more typical in sunsets. You have really bright sun during sunset, but then there's so many harsh shadows because the sun is low. And you have to pick your battles. Either you want to capture the beautiful colors in the sky, or you want to capture, if it's fall, the beautiful colors of all the trees in the landscape. It's very difficult, even with ETTR, to do both without bracketing the shots and doing an HDR of some kind. So just keep that in mind. Um, and I did a video. It's one of my very earliest videos about tweaking your histogram. So watch that video, and that'll give you some more detail about what I'm talking about. It's called tweaking your histogram video on my channel. But yeah, ETTR, I don't like to preach one technique over another, because there's ETTL, right, exposed to the left. uh, and these are just kind of, to me, kind of gimmicks to, I don't know, with a high dynamic range scene, you're just not gonna, like I said, you have to pick your battles and then compose the shot so that you get uh, the things that you want the focus on to be clear without noise and grain, or without clipping the highlights and retaining color, etc. All right, I look a bit blurry. It's possible. Let me see. Yeah, the autofocus is on. Okay, I might be overexposed slightly though. Let me just take it down a notch. Oh, that's probably too much. Okay. Um, yeah, you guys are laughing at my mom. I'm just catching up here. Yes, Rick, I was talking about noise and microphones. It's, you know, the concept of the digital conversion, because it's doing also an analog to digital conversion, right? So I think the analogy is sound in that respect to digital cameras, to the extent of where there's a noise floor between sensors and microphones. There's always a noise floor, and some are better than others. And it also has to do with signal to noise ratio, right? So if I talk loudly, you're less likely to hear the hissing and noise in the background versus like a very bright image. You're going to see less noise, and that's the other reason I tested, because of the other criticism or suggestion I got was to take the picture in a well lit uh, a scene, and I'm like, well, if I take it in a well lit scene, there's going to be less noise because generally speaking, when you have a very high signal, meaning a bright image, the noise floor, you're not going to get as much noise in the image. So I did it in a relatively dim scene so that I would have a higher noise floor overall, or less signal, I should say. Um, okay, let me get way caught up here. This was all of the stuff about me being out. Rich shoots at 6400 all the time. Yeah, I shoot at that all the time myself. How do you expect us to concentrate with all that cookies? I know this was a shot I took at some bakery. I recorded and was going to do a whole photo walk, you know, uh, short trek on it, but I never put it together. But I got a few nice shots out of the photo walk. Um, okay. Kent's ordered the 7.5 millimeter Samyang, and a couple of days ago. Oh, okay. Yeah, that'll be cool. That sounds like a cool lens. Um, fisheye is fun. I mean, it's nice to sprinkle, even in professional work. If you do events, it's kind of nice to sprinkle in a few fisheye shots of the event, particularly if you're high up or down low. You can add in a couple. Now, don't do all the shots in fisheye. Obviously, people are going to get bored to death of that. But if you have all your normal shots at whatever event, whether it's a family picnic or whatever you're doing, professional or personal, it's fun to kind of sprinkle in some of those sometimes. I might could swing 400 to 500 if it'll work for vlogging as well as travel camera. Yeah, I'm really I do video at ISO. I think the max is ISO 3200 in video, and I've done that all the time in very low light. So the images are noisy because there's barely any signal there, right? But I don't know for pro work what the tolerance is, right, for video. And there's really good software out there to denoise video to the point that, yeah, if you're shooting at ISO 400 or 800, you can denoise it so it looks virtually as good as base ISO. From what I've seen, some examples I've seen, but I don't do any denoising or anything in my videos. I think even now I'm at like ISO 400, believe it or not, or 600, and a lot of the videos I record for my tutorials are typically at 400 or 800. And you can barely see the noise. Maybe you can. I don't know. My eyes aren't that great anyway. Give my mom one of the t-shirts, soup is not food. I know, right? Fish and tadpoles swimming in my suit. All right, I'm almost caught up here. Oh, so you were trying back to that original focus stacking. You were using the 60 millimeter macro, which has focus stacking ability, which is different than bracketing, right? But yeah, try Picolet. It might be just the software. Do I recommend the 30 macro? No. Generally, I do not recommend the 30 millimeter macro if you're planning to do macro shots. Uh, if you want to use it in lieu of, say, the 25 millimeter, because the 25 millimeter I've seen is typically double the price, right? You may want to do it for that because it's a relatively normal focal length. But the macro ability on it, the problem is you have to focus too close, the focusing distance, to get that true one-to-one macro. So if you're planning to do macro work, I always recommend the longest lens you can get, which currently is the 60 millimeter macro. I heard they're coming out with a 100 millimeter macro potentially, but uh, yeah, for macro work, I don't recommend the 30 too much. Unless you don't mind getting this close. But if you're thinking about, if you really want to expand your macro photography to doing insects and all kinds of things, right? They don't normally let you get that close. And then the other problem when you get this close is you can't bring additional lighting in. You'd have to get one of those ring lights that you attach to the lens. Then you'll be okay, but if you're using a off-camera flash and trying to flash in, sometimes your lens is so close it creates a shadow onto the subject that you're trying to get a picture of. So there's a lot of, so you have to kind of think about that too. But if you have a 60 millimeter macro where you can get 3-4 inches away and still get one-to-one, you have enough room to get your light in there without creating a shadow. Or you have to buy a ring light for your, or ring flash or ring light. They have LED ring lights and then they have ring flashes. And Olympus sells a dual flash setup, which is not bad. Edian says Robin did a video on ETTR. Yeah, everybody's done one, except me. I'm just not a fan of teaching something that really is limited use case. I think it's better to teach how to properly expose and expose for the subject versus trying to expose for everything and not getting anything right, you know? But it is a legitimate skill set to have, knowing what exposing to the right is, because you do want to use it sometimes for certain types of scenes, potentially, right? But uh, usually you do ETTR with the intent to process that in post-processing as well. Um, so that's kind of another cross because right now I'm in this mode of just trying to get it best I can in camera without going into post-processing. Rich says, I'm a bird photographer and ETTR 1.3 to 2.3 to get everything exposed correctly. Yeah, with birds, yeah, I typically just dial in 1 or 2 stops of EV, to expose the bird properly and then not worry about where the sky falls because a lot of times the sky will be overexposed anyway. Um, but I don't think of it as ETTR. I think of it as just exposure compensation because I know the bird is going to be at least 2 stops underexposed versus the sky, if not a lot more, right? So um, you may, if it's a very dark bird like a blackbird, a crow, or something, sometimes you have to dial in even more. And in birds in flight, you don't have time to be looking at your histogram, right? You just dial in 2 or 3 EV and fire away. You don't have time to look at a histogram. Oh, a 45 macro, maybe. Maybe. I think the 60 macro would be better though. Uh, Microsoft end of life. Is anyone confused about? I have no idea. All I know is Microsoft owes me like 10 years of my life back from updates and rebooting. Uh, my God, I appreciate your YouTube. You are the best. Oh, thank you. Appreciate that. For anyone not familiar with terminology, ETTR, okay, yeah, exposed to the right. Um, Edward, how are you? You just moved from a DSLR to Olympus. When I use Pro Capture, half press the shutter, does it add to the EM1X shutter count? I don't have an EM1X to tell you, but I know that uh, generally silent or electronic shutter does not add to the shutter count. At least it doesn't on the EM10 Mark II. I haven't bothered to check if they've changed that in newer cameras. If electronic shutter adds to the shutter count, I believe it does now, but it might be a separate counter. So you'll have to check the shutter count, take a few shots in electronic shutter, and then check it again and see if it added to it. If you don't know how to check the shutter count, Robin Wong actually did a good video on that of how to check the shutter count. So search his channel on how to check shutter count in the camera, then you can see for yourself if it does or not. Um, yeah, everyone seems to like the 60 millimeter. It's a great lens. Um, oh, Rick makes a good point. You know, on the ring lights, you can cover half of the ring light so that you're only getting lighting from one side of it, and that'll create more shadows onto the subject. Yeah, I forgot about that. Um, and that, for macro photography, you know, a lot of people buy ring lights when they want to get really close, but it evenly illuminates things. So just cover half of the ring light, and you'll get a little bit more detail. No, don't kill the insects polarized. Let's see. I use 4 custom shooting modes and set each one differently. Oh, you're welcome, Colin. Thank you. Hello from Maine. Hi, Peter. What is the obsession with shutter count? It's not important. Enjoying the camera and use it. Um, I don't know. Sometimes it's just some. I'm this way too. I don't worry about shutter count, but I worry about other things sometimes that really don't mean anything. But just that curiosity of wanting to know if something is something, right? Not not that it matters. Ultimately, you know, shutter count's important for professionals when they feel like their camera's kind of halfway through or near its end of life cycle and they need to replace it because they don't want the camera to fail on the job potentially. Um, so in that sense, I think shutter count makes a difference. Yeah, Paul says the 60 millimeter is pretty good for portraits too. Yeah. Yeah, I think Jimmy Chang did a video on where he used that for portraits and he really liked it. Uh, do you update firmware on your lenses? I do update them. So, you know, you attach the camera, you attach the lens to the camera, and then you do a firmware update, and then the firmware workspace will tell you if the lens has a firmware update. So it's always good to do firmware updates. on the lenses, but particularly for Panasonic lenses, if you use them on your Olympus cameras and vice versa, because sometimes there's incompatibilities between the manufacturers and they correct those through a firmware update, either in the camera or in the lens, sometimes both. And that seems to be the most common update in firmware is, every other firmware update seems like it's a lens update. Like, they released a new lens, but the camera's not able to take advantage of some of the features, or there's some incompatibility between manufacturers, so they release a firmware update to fix that. Microsoft is telling us users of Windows 10 version 1908 that the product is end of life. It might be you just need to update the Windows and then you're fine. But I don't know, when they say end of life, that sounds a little bit more than an update to me. I'll have to look into it. I have no idea. Cindy's saying, is the Godox TT6850 flash a good flash for Olympus? For portrait pics, is a lot of Olympus version flash probably overkill? Yeah, I mean, I like the Godox flashes. I assume that the 6850 is a more powerful flash than the TT350. And yeah, you'll be fine with that. You may want to consider getting an X1T radio trigger so you can control the flash off camera, use an umbrella, and if it's indoor stuff, you could even get away with a TT350. But the 6850, I assume, is a more powerful flash, like double the output, right? Me personally, I would probably, I guess the TT6850 is like less than $200. But the AD200, if you really want to get serious about portraits, the AD200 is really the way to go. But that's a $300 flash plus a trigger. You're out another 40 bucks there. So say 350 bucks for a good AD200 setup. That I would recommend for portraits, or get two TT6850s. Then you can use one at a lower power for fill light, and use one for the key lighting. And again, you'll need the trigger so that you can control both the flashes from the camera. And that would probably be the best way to do it. And that's what's nice about Godox is you can expand the lighting system with just using one trigger, and it'll trigger any flash that you buy. For me, what I do is I use the TT350 and the AD200 combination. And I use the TT350 just for a little bit of fill light. And then I use the AD200 through an umbrella. And that gives me sort of, a nice balance for portraits. A lot of times I'll just use a reflector and bounce the TT350 directly off the reflector, because sometimes when you have the AD200, not enough light goes through the umbrella down to the reflector, then bounce back to your subject. So what I'll do is I'll put the TT350 in front of the reflector, and then I'll have the AD200 through an umbrella up here, and then I get a nice balanced light. Oh, Paul bought the Sigma 56 f1.4. Yeah, I hear good things about that lens. I wish Olympus would give us my sets in the M1 too. Yeah. Instead of turning the dial, I mean, the M1 Mark II gives us 4 custom, or 3, I think. It's 3, I think, on the M1 Mark II. Yeah, I'm using it now. But it's 3 on the M1 Mark II. But yeah, it'd be nice. It'd be nice to have the option, right? I mean, there's a little conflict between custom buttons, programming function buttons, and using the mode dial. If you've ever seen any of my how to program custom buttons and function buttons, you know, my recent ones, I talk about those conflicts. So that's probably why they don't do it. Peter says, I purchased the TT350 on your recommendation. Thanks. I do have problems taking the trigger off the hot shoe on the M1 Mark II. No, I don't have any problems. I mean, just make sure you turn the wheel all the way so that the locking pin goes up far enough. But no, I don't have any issues with the TT350. But yeah, you do have to don't unscrew it just a little. Unscrew it all the way because it retracts the locking pin back into the hot shoe or back into the trigger, so it'll slide out easier. Maybe that's all it is. When I shoot HDR, should I aim to have the histogram in the middle? Yes, I guess that works. It's really hard to do depending on the scene, though, because the histogram is rarely a nice bell curve, right? Usually it's like all over the place. But if you can get a bell curve on the normal shot, then yeah, that's the best way to go. Oh, thanks, thanks. Yeah, I'm thinking about getting some new vests. I'm like a hardcore vest guy now. The Sigma is amazing. At 1.4, it's sharper than the 60 at 2.8. The bulk is extremely good. Never thought I could achieve something like that. Yeah, I mean you have a pretty long focal length and a fast aperture because that's an equivalent 105 millimeter or 112 millimeter f2.8, which is really very shallow. You'll get a very shallow depth of field, especially for portraits if you're very close. And it's not too big of a lens, relatively speaking. I mean, I've thought about that lens, but I have a 75 f1.8, which is very good too. So I don't have a need for that lens. It's funny. It's like I'll buy cameras I don't need, but lenses sometimes I'm a little bit more picky. I don't know why. I guess because they cost more than some of the cameras. Wow, okay. It looks like I'm all caught up on the comments here. So if I missed a question from before, just go ahead and post it again so I can read it. Because I never want to miss anyone's questions. It's really frustrating because sometimes I go back and I watch the streams and I totally missed a person's question. And a lot of times at this point they've already left. So they don't get a chance to ask me again. I'm really sorry about that. But I try to answer the question as best I can. How does the Sigma compare to the Ollie 45 f1.8 or f1.2? Well, I don't have that lens, but I mean, honestly, I would get if you're on a budget, go ahead and get the Sigma because it's less than 500 bucks, right? And I haven't really heard anything bad about it. So if you get it and it works great, you know, within the return window, I don't see why not go with the Sigma first. But me personally, I try to avoid third-party lenses, third-party autofocus lenses, because sometimes there's compatibility issues, right, that are difficult to fix if ever. You know, like I rarely buy Panasonic third-party lenses, and because of that issue. And God knows if you get Sigma, it may be another issue. Um, and I can't give you any specific examples, but rule of thumb is, you know, just buy Olympus glass. I mean, Olympus makes fine glass, but I understand the price point, right? I mean, a 45 f1.2 is like $1,000, and you can get a Sigma for about 400, and uh, get the same bokeh or depth of field, relatively speaking. But I would say that the Sigma Pro lens, it's weather sealed and it's going to be super sharp. The images that I've seen from it have been excellent. But if you're just casual photographer, like you're not doing pro work, try Sigma. Why not? I don't have the Ollie 45 f1.8 or 1.2, but I have the Sigma. Yeah. I used to have a Sigma 50 f1.4 art lens. It's like a $900 for my Nikon. It was very sharp, but it had some quality issues with respect to the build quality. My lens used to squeak sometimes, so it would autofocus and you'd hear this little squeak, like weak, weak, weak. And it was brand new, and I didn't drop it. Okay, I was actually a little bit more careful back in the day. Hey Rob, what would be able to make an OMD 10 Mark II video playlist of all relevant videos? I'm a few weeks. I do have a playlist for the M10 Mark II. So check my channel under playlist and see. I've organized most of them, but I'll go back and double check. I probably need to reorganize them again, but I did make an attempt a few weeks ago to organize them. Is the EM1 Mark I still a viable camera? Yeah, it is. I mean, it doesn't have video features and things like that, which are kind of the selling point these days. But for photography, it's perfectly fine. It's a solid camera. I wouldn't hesitate recommending that to anybody. There's one actually. I was looking at one at the camera store online. They have one for like 350 bucks with 3 extra batteries and a grip and everything. I was like, wow, that's pretty tempting to get an EM1 because the original EM1 Mark I has the regular tilt screen instead of the flip screen. And that's a little bit more conducive, or that's what I prefer for photography. And yeah, it's a solid camera though. My new hobby is to photograph abandoned houses. It is for this purpose I bought the fisheye. Oh, okay, yeah. Old houses are cool. That's strange. I had no issue with my Sigma lens, but I only had it for 2 months, so yeah, time will tell. Yeah, the Sigma 56 is a totally different lens than what I had. I had the 50mm f1.4 art lens. Because back then when they had just come out with the art series, the 18 to 35, the 50-1.4, the 24 to 105 f4. So I spent like $3,000 on 3 lenses from Sigma, and I sold them all back like within a year, back to the camera store and got I don't know what I bought in exchange, but I got rid of them all because they were all too heavy, just big and heavy freaking lenses. They were full frame lenses, not the 18 to 35, but even that baby lens was heavy, right? That was an APS-C lens. And the APS-C, the 18 to 35, would miss focus all the time. I mean, I would get that confirmation beep, um, and then I'd go back home and I'd look at them and say, man, everything's out of focus. So ever since then, I just don't buy Sigmas because I had that quality issue and I had the autofocus issue with my Nikons. But the Sigma 60 f2.8 that they sell for Micro Four Thirds, I hear is really good. The 56 f1.4 that you're talking about, I hear is excellent. So I don't want to tell people not to buy Sigma. I'm just telling you why I don't buy Sigma because I had a bad experience with mine. Now, I will say that the Sigma 24 to 105 f4 art lens that I bought, that was an excellent lens. Really tack sharp. And I had no quality issues, no focusing issues with it. It was really good. But 2 out of 3 were bad for me, so I just got rid of them all. A friend of mine was asking when all of the pandemic camera sales reductions are going to happen. Are sales still holding up during? Yeah, no, the sales are tanking. I haven't seen any good deals either. that I want to jump on. There was a lot of good deals right before all this started, actually. And there was a 1 day or 2 days where they had a really good deal on refurbished stuff. But yeah, the last 4 or 5 weeks, I haven't seen really much at all. Hans, if they sell third-party lenses for Micro Four Thirds that are autofocus, they should be compatible. So if it's made for Micro Four Thirds and it's autofocus, you should be fine. But Olympus has a pretty good selection of lenses. There's not really any reason to buy third party, in my opinion. You know, the Sigma 56 f1.4 is kind of the exception because Olympus doesn't have anything like that anywhere near that price. The closest thing is the 45 f1.8 or the 45 f1.2, and that's not that close to the 56 f1.4. Let's see, would it be a good idea to buy a used 70-300 and attach it via adapter to an M43? No, I would not do that. It's very bulky. I mean, it's already kind of a bulky lens, and then you're adding an adapter on top of that, and then if it's an EM1 Mark II or an EM1 Mark I, supposedly the phase detect works better with the 4/3 lenses, but it's still kind of bulky, right? So I would just get the 75-300 native lens for Micro Four Thirds. Save up for that. I just don't see it's worth it. And the new lenses, well, anyway. Recently seeing some photos online taken by an Ollie 25 f1.8. Yeah, the 25 f1.8 is amazingly sharp lens. I love that lens. Not a fan of the focal length, but that's just me. I need to get out and shoot with it more, then maybe I'll be a fan. But I am a fan of the lens in terms of its image quality. It's excellent. Oh, hi, Elaine. How are you? Ooh, wow, we're a little over an hour into it today. Well, not really, because I had a couple of breaks where I started late, and then my mom brought me some soup. Let's see. Can you tell me how to shoot the Milky Way with my EM5 Mark III, or is this outside the scope of this session? Yeah, I'm a little bit rusty on astrophotography. I haven't been out in a long time, but I will do a video for it. But generally speaking, you want to use as wide a lens as you can, say 12 millimeters or wider, and you want to set your exposure for about 15 to 20 seconds at most, at say ISO 1600, give or take. You'll have to experiment a little bit, but those settings will give you probably. Okay, and what you're trying to avoid is if you keep your shutter speed longer than that, 30 to 40 seconds or a minute, you'll start to get star trails. So unless you're going for that effect, you want to keep your stars nice and sharp, pinpoint sharp. So 15 to 20 seconds is about all you can do on a 12 millimeter lens. You can do almost 25 seconds with, say, the 8 millimeter or 7 millimeter. And you want to use as fast a lens as possible. You know, you want to shoot with an f1.8 or an f2. The 12 millimeter f2 is not a bad choice. It's not as wide as I would want for me personally. For Astro, I like really wide lenses. The best lens is probably the 8 millimeter fisheye f1.8. That's probably the best lens for astrophotography that Olympus has, in my opinion, because it's very fast, very wide, very sharp. And you can shoot at 25 seconds at, say, ISO 1600. And you have to manually focus, but it's doable, you know. What do I think of Olympus would develop a 7.5 millimeter lens like the Lava, but with autofocus? I don't know. I don't know if they're going to make a wide angle prime that autofocuses. It's a very niche product, but they should. And it has to be fast, you know. Like they have a 12 millimeter f2. Why not an 8 millimeter f2? That would be awesome. That's not a fisheye. I think a lot of people would like that for astro work. I've tried attaching the Tamron 18 to 400 from Nikon via adapter for shooting the moon, and I loved it. Gave me an equivalent. Yes, you can do that. I attached my Tamron 150 to 600 and got a moon shot. It was a pain because at 600 millimeters, it was. I think I shot it at 500 millimeters because I couldn't get a sharp image at 600. But yeah, you can do all kinds of things. Late, late, late for an important date. Oh, hi. uh, Eclectic mount and tracker will help with astrophotography. Yes, trackers are not too expensive now because the cameras are so light. The Olympus cameras, you can buy a smaller tracker for 300 bucks, give or take. And if you have a really long lens, that's how people capture like those nebulas and things. I mean, you can track it yourself. uh, if you have a long lens, it's just harder. Having a tracker really lets you do very long exposures, but you can't do more than say an hour of shooting. Um, Mainly because the battery's going to die unless you have the M1 Mark III or the M1X where you can run the camera off an external power supply. But yeah, trackers, you could use a tracker and shoot for an hour, 2 hours, and then come back and post. I mean, that's a whole genre of photography that you can get really amazing results from, but you have to put a lot of work into it. You know, I'm fine with about 40 or 50 images. That takes about 10, 15 minutes, and then stack those, and it's good enough for just casual stuff. And that's what I want to do when this lockdown is over, is go out on a clear night and do some astrophotography, and then maybe do a tutorial and I'll use the EM10 Mark II with the kit lens, and then I'll try something more high-end, EM1 Mark III with the Fisheye Pro. I want to experiment with all of that and then get into the post-processing part and then do a full tutorial on it. I mean, I've done it before in the past with my Nikon a lot. I experimented a little bit with the Olympus and I got, decent results, but I haven't gone back out hardcore with a single intent to do the best I can, doing everything I know how to do. Oh, hey Corna, how are you? Yeah, tracking mounts are great. They screw onto the yeah. Yep. Yeah, you have to go to dark skies, look for somewhere that has the least amount of light pollution that you can get to. So really, astrophotography really takes a lot of planning too, right? You have to go when your schedule's free, it's a clear night, there's no moon out, um, and it's not so cold, right? That your batteries are going to die in 30 minutes. So there's a lot of things, a lot of planning involved in astro. I mean, I wish I didn't live in this highly light polluted area. I'd love to just be able to tip out the back door and try and practice astro without having to drive 3 hours away and camp, spend the night. Uh, I mean, I love camping, but um, like I said, it's a lot of overhead to do astrophotography where I live. Hi, I have a 14 to 150, and I'm thinking about trading it for 12 to 200. The positives and negatives. Yeah, the positives are it's a very sharp lens. It has image stabilization built in, so you get better image stabilization, theoretically, right, with the right camera. And the I think the main benefit is the wider field of view, right? 12 millimeters is significantly wider than 14. It doesn't seem like it but in practice, when you actually start taking shots, you're like, man, I wish I had a 12 instead of a 14. And I can say that because a lot of times I'll have my 14 millimeter kit lens, 14 to 42, and it's not wide enough, but the 12 is. So the wide part I really like. The constant f4 is good for video work in theory. So I think it's just the sharpness of that lens. The downside is it's freaking heavy. It's a very heavy lens, and that's why I don't use it. And it's kind of bulky. I mean, it's like the size of this lens, but twice the weight. And yeah, so that's why I don't. I'm not buying it for myself. I just don't think it's worth it. I bought a 12 millimeter f2 lens instead of getting a 12 to 100, and that solved my problem on the wide end. For overall sharpness, yeah, the 12 to 100 is going to be better, but I would rather buy a couple of primes to get the sharpness I want at the focal lengths I use the most. But the 14 to 150 is a more versatile lens, and it's still weather sealed, and it's relatively sharp lens. It's not, as sharp as the 12 to 100, but it's a good lens. So for the $1,000 or $1,200 that they want for a 12 to 100, I'd rather buy a couple of primes. Yeah, Astro is definitely better with digital. Better than film, anyway. Well, digital is better than film in a lot of ways. I mean, technically speaking. From a photography standpoint, there's not that much difference just one has a different aesthetic to it, a film look, because it's film. I mean, I love shooting film personally. Rick was talking about his friend's Astro tracker started smoking after 10 seconds. That's funny. I mean, it's not funny, it's scary, right? But still. If you have a tripod, right, you can track it yourself. You just take a few images uh, while the nebula or whatever it is you're tracking is in the frame. Then you move the camera up and refocus it, and then take a few more images. And then in software, you have to stack and align everything back together. It's not as clean a process as using a tracker, but it still can be done. Hey Rob, I'm mainly interested in capturing cyclists moving at a relatively high speed with the motion blur effect. What image stabilization settings would you recommend for my Mark III? Uh, Honestly, you're probably I think it's SIS3. You have to double check the manual for which one it is that's for horizontal panning. But I think it's SIS because there's SIS 3 and 4. I think it's SIS 3. It's one of the two for horizontal panning. And that's the image stabilization you would use. The other option is to turn image stabilization off altogether uh, and eliminate that variable and just pan it yourself, because the human body is relatively stable when you're panning, right? So there's not that much vibration versus when you're holding a camera steady, the human body shakes a little bit. The human body naturally has a tremor in it at a certain frequency, and that's what image stabilization is supposed to negate, is that tremor, particularly when you're hand holding taking a still image. But a panning shot, since the body is moving, that is pretty much negated, that tremor effect. It's mitigated quite a bit. So the image stabilization is not as critical in a panning shot, because most of the image is blurry anyway, right? Except for the person potentially. and even then it's pretty difficult. Really panning, you have to practice a lot uh, to get a good panning shot to begin with. So I would practice probably without image stabilization on at all. But if you do want to use it, um, I think it's SIS3. Bob says people who say film is better are just stubborn. Yeah, I think it's better to say some people just prefer film. I not, I don't think one is better than the other. They're very different formats, right? Uh, so I don't think you're comparing apples to apples in terms of photography. Ah, Elena's saying, I guess while you're riding in a car, take a picture of the person riding next to you. I guess that would work. Yes, Jeff, Robin just did a video on image stabilization. So you can check that out too. It has good information in the different compatibility modes. Um, yeah, I thought it was a good video on image stabilization. Yeah, I mean, photography most of the time is all about technique, right? And the skill of the photographer. We have a lot of nice things in our cameras to kind of help us, uh, but it's no substitute for true skill or being a, having a being a very skilled photographer. There's never a substitute for that. Whether you're using a cell phone as your camera or, you know, an EM1 Mark III, there's no substitute for having good photography skill. Oh, thanks, Magnus. I'm happy to do them. I have 4 film cameras and gear I'm trying to sell. Yeah, try KEH. I hear good things about them. All right, I'm going to take questions for about 5 more minutes, and then I'm going to transition into reviewing the pictures that were submitted from everybody. So if anyone else has any questions. Oh, good night, Barry. See my post about image stabilization and robtreks. Oh yeah, Rick did a really good post in my forum about image stabilization. Really excellent post there. I mean, I've been meaning to do a video on image stabilization, um, but I don't know. I have trouble wrapping my brain around how to explain it. When I watch other people's videos on it, I'm thinking, wow, they did a good job. And then when I think about how I would word it or explain it, nothing comes out of my brain. I just get this mental lock. Like, I don't know why. So, because my problem is image stabilization. I just set it on auto and never use it. Uh, or never think about it, right? When I'm actually doing photography, I just leave it on auto. Unless I'm on a tripod, I turn it off. I mean, there's some certain best practices I guess I could talk about when it comes to image stabilization. But I don't know why that my brain just crashes when I when I start thinking about image stabilization because it's something I just never think about. It's either on when I'm hand holding or off when I'm on a tripod. That's about it. Okay, Peter, we'll see you later. Any thought on bringing Gordon Lang or Gavin Hoey on this stream? I haven't actually reached out to them at all. I thought about it. I'll start reaching out next month. It's next month tomorrow, right? I'll start reaching out to some new people next month and see what I can get in. I just need a little break from having guests. I was having a little bit of fatigue from having guests all the time because it's mentally draining when you have a guest on. Uh, I mean, the guests are awesome, and they like every time I have a guest on, they give so much good information that I could never give. You know, their level of experience uh, far exceeds mine. So I'm always impressed and happy to have guests on my stream for you guys, right? To be, to ask questions and learn from their experience. But for me personally, it's a really draining thing, to watch to manage the comment section and the all of that stuff. It seriously, like after a guest live stream, every single one I've done, I crash, man. I just go hit the sofa and I pass out for a couple hours after after the guest live streams because it just drains me, you know. Um, I don't know. Maybe I should see a doctor. I don't know. I get tired so easily. I need lots of coffee. I mean, I normally drink 1 cup a day, and it's a big cup, so I guess it's equivalent to 2 cups or 1.5 cups. But I'm up to 2 cups a day now just to kind of stay awake. This is kind of a more recent thing. Let's see, Craig from E6. Yeah, I did send him an email twice, and he never replied. Uh, so I'll try again. I mean, all I can do is ask, right? Um, I think there was some request to have Joe Edelman on the show too. He would be really good because I don't do portraits at all, and he's an awesome portrait photographer. Um, and I got an email for some recommendations for a landscape photographer, and in my email, I forget her name, but someone emailed me like this landscape photographer. She does podcasts or something, so I have to share that information later. Plato, you can relate, huh? You've done live streams. It's very, yeah, because I'm managing 2 monitors with multiple things going on. This monitor has 2 screens going on. This monitor has the one screen with the chat on it, and then this other thing has um well, anyway, yeah, it's like mission control here, you know? Okay. All right. So if there's no other questions, I'm gonna take a 1 minute break here and download the images that people submitted for review. So if you like to hang out for the picture reviews and critiques, you're welcome to stay, as always. But I know some people, they don't care about that stuff, right? They're like, they just want to ask a few questions or just chit chat. But reviewing images, they bores them to tears. And then other people, they love those things. So and I have fun too. I learn a lot when I review other people's images because it makes me think about what I would really do. I have to be a lot more critical or put a lot more thought into someone else's picture, right? In of itself. All right. Okay, so in no particular order, I guess however Workspace sorts these, but this is what's come in today. I got 10 pictures. And oh, thanks, Elaine. Uh oh, nice flower picture. I think honestly there's not much here to do. Um in terms of composition, I don't like these petals being cut off. And if during the break, I have a picture of a photo that I did, a picture of a photo. I have a picture of a flower that I did where I cropped it in to the one corner, right? Uh, So I would do that because this is cut off now. And then all of this doesn't really add anything to it. So I would do, I would probably just do that. Oh, maybe a little bit more of the flower. If I had to change anything at all, really nothing needs to be changed. And then just crank in a little sharpness so it's nice and crisp. I don't see anything else that needs to be done. Let me play with the curve a little bit. And again, I'm just editing these photos the way if they were my own personal ones. So I'm not really critiquing. I'm just showing you what I would do and what I'm thinking when I do these things. But feel free to comment. I'm trying to keep an eye on your comments down here. Yeah, just a little bit more contrast or more blacks. I don't think I need to do anything on the whites. Yeah, well, tiny bit, just like that. And what do we got? Clarity. Clarity usually helps a little bit there. I don't think the haze is going to do anything. That'll probably make it worse. Something like that. Yeah, just, hey Rob, just send it to my forum over there so I can look at your flower photo. A little too late to put it into the stream today. But that's what I would do. So let's compare the before and after. That's all I would do to this. But yeah, you don't really need to capture all of the petals. You can just kind of capture the petals on one side and focus in on the center here where all the yellow is, right? And then just punch up the contrast and sharpness to make it kind of crispy, and that's it. That's all I would do there. Yeah, Paul, it's very sharp photo. So just adding a little sharpness in post just makes it pop a little bit more, I think. That's, yeah, that looks good to me. Okay, let's try the next one. All right, nice blue hour shot. I think, let's see. It just feels a little bit soft here. Oh, you're at ISO 6400, so you lost a little bit of detail in the shot. So this must be handheld. It'd have been nice if you could have been on a tripod. But I like the composition. I like being able to see down into the street here with people walking around. But I think you did a little post-processing on this because it's very, very soft. So it looks like you might have done some denoise either in camera or in post-processing, because it's just I would have preferred to have a little bit of less processing on the noise and kept the grain and kept it a little sharper. And there's just not a whole lot of light in here. Let me raise the exposure a tiny bit. So I'm going to raise the exposure, then go into the curve and bring the blacks back down. Something like that. I'm not, the question is, can I use HDR1 or 2 in monochrome on the EM1 Mark II? I think you can. I'll check. Hold on. Let me finish this image here. Let me see if I can bring some of the sharpness back. But yeah, I think that's the only challenge I have with this image is it feels like you did post-processing. Either you had the noise level, noise in-camera noise filter set too high. I always turn it off. And I don't like to apply too much noise processing on high ISO images because you just lose a little bit too much detail. And then I would just warm this image up a little bit on the white balance. Oops, that's too much, but yeah, right about there. Just warm this up in here a little bit. So I think you did a white balance. It seems like the white balance is tuned to the street here, but streets usually have a strong tungsten lighting. So it just looks a little bit off to me visually. What about some magenta? Yeah, a little bit of magenta. But compositionally, I don't think I would change anything. It seems fine. So let's see how that compares. Virtually no difference. But I just made it a little bit brighter and tried to warm it up some. Yeah, that's all I can do there. Does anyone else have any ideas on this one? I'm kind of at a loss. I mean, it's a really nice shot, but all the detail got lost with the noise filter. Okay, said I would crop the vertical and lose the left tower. The street leads into the, well, I would crop the vertical and lose this left tower. Okay, let me try that. Let's do a vertical shot. Okay. I don't know, Plato, does that look, yeah, that's a little stronger image, isn't it? I would agree with that. So there's the before and after. Yeah, I think the vertical makes for a better shot. I agree. But I would definitely go back out with a tripod and try to use a lower ISO and turn off the noise filters. And that would make this very, very crisp. Yeah, good suggestion, guys. And Elaine, yeah. All right, sorry guys. Lost my video. Can you guys see me? Okay, good, good. All right, sorry about that. I'm having a video driver problem, so I need to check my drivers before the next stream. Okay, yeah, that was a good suggestion. Let's go to the next image. All right. Okay, this is slightly long exposure. Let me see, it's 30 seconds. Okay, 30-second exposure. So we smoothed out the water. It's a beautiful shot. I like the foreground and this rock. I like this line on the sun. What do we know? We're at f16. Okay. So everything's fairly crisp. There's a little bit of looks like a little bit of chroma potentially. So maybe take a little bit of the purple out. Ugh. Maybe just cool it off slightly. I mean, this is very subjective working with the color itself. And yeah, so I think I see some spots here, so that's probably probably using a polarizer or something, or an ND filter, maybe 16 seconds f630. Yeah, you would have had to be using probably an ND filter. So that's probably why there's a little bit of flare or ghosting here. So let me try a little bit of dehaze to get rid of some of that. That makes it worse, but it still needs some dehaze. But okay, I think this works. I would just adjust the color slightly, but I like everything else, and I think the horizon is perfectly straight. Let me see. Maybe a half a degree off. Just a half a degree, maybe. Not even that, 0.1. And can I play with the curves a little bit? I always like just a little more pop. There. That's all I would do to this. I mean, compositionally, yeah, it could be spots on the sensor, right? Oh, let me see. Um, oh, okay, Wahhabi, yeah, use the cheap ND filter. Okay, so that I was kind of thinking you had a lens on the front. It could be dust on the sensor itself, but typically it's usually because the lens has dust on it, not the sensor. Um, when you see sensor spots, they're usually more defined, very fine, sharp circles, like what do they call it? I don't know, but usually sensor dust is much more distinctive spots on it. Um, or spray on the lens, yeah, but I think it's on the lens. Oh, Elaine, I don't know why everything is out of focus. Check the little cog on the video where you can change the resolution up to a higher resolution. Usually on the bottom right of the video, you see a little cog or gear that you can up the video resolution. That's probably what it is. Yeah, small droplets. Yeah, I could see that. It looks like it's something. Either like salt water got on it and dried or something. But that's all. But that's all I would do. Let me see. Any other suggestions? Because that's all I can do with this. Because it's a beautiful shot as is, other than just these little technical things, which would be easily fixed in Photoshop. You know, you would just brush those out. I guess I could brush it out. Let me try and brush that one out. Let me see. I need a bigger brush. I don't know if that helped or hurt, but that looks a little bit off. Let me try again. Let me pick this spot. There. without taking forever. But I think that's what I would do. Any suggestions? Just naturally messed up. Oh, okay. Ugh, why is the clone brush showing? Let me get back over here. Um, okay, but that's the before and after. I just changed the white balance a little bit and sharpened it tiny bit. That's all. I'd like to get a little more, it'd be nice if there was a little catch light on this rock too. Let me see if I can bring that out a little bit. Um, so what I need to do, let me lock this here. Whoops. Oh, no, that's not going to work. So we'll just go back to what I had here. All right, that's all I can do. So that's the before and after. I would brush in Photoshop a little bit more light on this rock, and that's about it. Okay. Let's go to the next one here. um, oh my God, this is hilarious. I love this flower hat she has on and a big old cigar sticking out her mouth. This is, what is this? Some kind of event. It's got an Obama button on there. I wouldn't change a thing here, man. This picture is perfect the way it is. Only, I mean, compositionally, I would have just kind of came a little bit more down to her level. So I was more eye to eye because it looks like you're pointing down slightly. Uh, but that's the only thing I would do differently. But yeah, I think that's that's all I would do. I mean, this would look good as a black and white too. Let me see. Let me try a green filter in black and white. Um, I mean, really, nothing needs to be done to this image. I mean, dehaze is really good with black and whites. It really brings out the texture and tones, I think, in the image. Let's see if I can bring the highlights down a tiny bit. Nah, that doesn't help at all. Yeah, that's all I would do. Oh, this John, this is your shot. You crop this person out on the left. That makes sense. But I think you could have left them in there. Um, but yeah, there's I'm really jacking this up. Let me reset everything. I don't think I don't think I don't think black and white is the way to go after all. So let's work with the color. Um, maybe let's see if we can bring some of the blue sky back in maybe. So I'll click on luminance and if there's anything left, maybe a little bit of the oranges. Bring the yellows up. That's just having so little effect. Take the dehaze back off. Yeah, John's saying I lose the effect of the vest. Yeah, I agree. I like this. I would just gotten a little bit lower to get the shot. Um, but okay, great shot though. I like it. Oh, Elaine says crop out right up to her head and crop the top is too high. Well, I kind of like this framing, but I suppose we could do that. Let me take a standard. I mean, I guess that helps a little bit. Yeah, Rick says if there was a little more depth of field, shallow depth of field, it would pop a little better. Yeah, it could. What are we at? We're at f1.8. I don't know how much shallower you can get than f1.8. And oh, because it's an XQ2, it's like one of those little baby Fujifilm cameras. That's why there's no depth of field at 1.8. Ah, but yeah, it looks good. Let me turn off these color adjustments I did. Yeah, those aren't doing anything. Oh, it's a 2/3 sensor? Yeah, John, I figured the XQ2, that's a nice little camera though. Great little pocket one you can put in and you get the Fuji colors and it's a really good lens. I mean, the detail here, look at that. You can see every little crease in her face. Oh my God, if I just crank the sharpness up here, well, maybe not that much. It brings out the noise too, but yeah, something like that. Yeah, we could blur this in Photoshop, right? It wouldn't be too hard to add like a depth of field effect in Photoshop, but I think you like this tight crop, Wolf Tick? Maybe. Oh, John, you have AC/DC. Yeah, you could use a little Gaussian blur in the background. I'm not that familiar with AC/DC, but any image editor that has where you can selectively uh, blur things or apply filters would be better than Workspace. Wolf Tiff likes me to crop all the way in on this woman here. So let me just crop in. We can probably go horizontal in this case, like a regular landscape mode. That's not bad either, really. Um, I mean, it's amazing. You can crop in so much even on this little tiny sensor. But maybe like this. That way you crop out all this stuff that was blown out in the highlights. And Rick says a little more contrast, huh? Okay, we can try. Just a tad. Oh, okay. Good idea. I like that. What if we pop a little more color in, just overall saturation? Where's my saturation bar? Right below the contrast. There we go. You think that's tight enough? The crop looks a little bit, feels a little bit. Let me try and crop it like that. Let me see what that does. Yeah, I like this crop a little better. I need a little bit more of her shoulder in. Rick, you think I need to crop more than this? Let me give you the 10-second stream delay. But I think right about there works for me. You think I should crop more than this or not? Yeah, the story's in a wrinkled face. Yeah. I mean, if you really want to get all of that, but then I think John is saying he wanted to capture the red vest and the green and everything there. For him, that was the story. But I could see cropping in like this. Let's see what that looks like full screen. That's pretty good. But if we're going to crop that much in, I feel like we could go black and white too. Dating, yeah, this is our dating service photo for Match.com, or what's that other swipe thing? Oh, Tinder, right? This is the Tinder shot. Yeah. You can go either way. Black and white or color, I think both work. All right, we'll move in. Try going in right on her eyes. Oh yeah, you liked it really tight when I did that zoom. What if I get the cigar out and everything? There's not enough detail left. Hold on. How about that? I mean, that's about as tight as I would go personally. But yeah, I mean, any tighter, a lot of there's just not enough detail left. I mean, as good as that little camera is, I think we've reached its limit. I'm cutting off her crown. Well, you can still see it, you know. I guess I could go up a little bit more, maybe do a portrait. And go this way. Let's see what that looks like. I mean, that's the other way you could go, right? If you wanted to capture this hat, because that hat is pretty crazy, right? Yeah, it's a great little camera, the XQ2. I looked at that briefly. I ended up buying a TG5 instead, but I did look at an XQ2 for a little while because I was looking for a little pocket camera. Okay, let's move on to the next one here. But this image has a lot going for it. You like the landscape shot better, Elaine? Yeah, maybe. I think they both work. Is this guy sleeping? This this has already been processed quite a bit though. There's a heavy vignette. I like this tan. Highlights a little bit blown out, but it's not much to change here. It's already been processed pretty much. It's a nice shot. This looks like Elaine's shot. Something you would do, Elaine. Let me see down here. Oh yeah, this is Elaine's shot. You always submit like an already finished image. Nothing for me to do, Elaine. It looks good though. I'm just curious about black and white. You can go either way. Black and white or color. But yeah, I wouldn't change anything here. This looks pretty good. All right. Yeah, John, you like that XQ2, man. That is awesome. Oh, I have a really good farm story. I have to save that for Sunday stream. It's or maybe the end of the stream I'll tell it. Okay. The face is dead center. Man, this stream is way behind here, the chat section. Because I've already moved on to another 2 pictures now. Let's see. Here. This is interesting, this shot, but I have no idea what's going on. And it's already been kind of cropped in. So I have a person. I feel like this is like that movie Predator, where they were kind of camping out in the woods, checking down like the enemy encampment, and getting ready to go down and save the hostages in this little shack over here. That's what this feels like. But okay, let's see. Wob says try a 6x9 crop. This is Serge's picture. Okay. Um, he's already cropped in pretty heavy on this based on the dimensions I have. But let me try a 16x9 first. Let's see what that does. That helps a little bit, but not enough. Let me see, maybe 16x7. Okay. That's kind of there. But yeah, Rick says a telephoto, seeing what they're doing. Yeah, because I can't really see what people are doing. It just feels like a wide shot um, of the whole area, but the whole area itself is not very interesting to me. But that's all I can do to this. I would I would just apply a grainy art filter to it like that. It's a little bit it's a little bit overexposed, but maybe a vintage 3. Yeah, vintage 3 looks good. Let me just double check the other filters. Oh, you know, a diorama would look good too. There we go. Now we're talking. And then, I mean, I'm totally jacking this up, but I think, where's my saturation? I need to turn that down a little. And it needs to be warmed up a tiny bit. There we go. I think that works. A nice diorama filter to kind of miniaturize it. Go wide and just warm it up. It needs a little bit warmer. And there you go. That's my take on this picture. So there's kind of the before and after. I think the before was just too wide. And like Rick was saying, you can't really see what people are doing, so the fact that they're in the shot doesn't matter. But I think this shot on the right is a lot more fun. Yeah, this looks good. I think like this. I like this. Just go wide. Oh wow, now I can see people here now that I've blown this up. So yeah, everybody's just too far away, but I think, yeah, just go with a toy filter and just deal with it that way. All right, let's move on to the next one. Uh, Live chat, 2-second delay. Okay, good. Oh, I got this on top chat still. Sorry. Let me change that. I forgot. That was the tip you gave me last time. It defaults to top chat for some reason. All right, we have a waterfall long exposure shot. This is probably another 5-10 second shot, it looks like. You just have to be careful when you do waterfalls and there's like foliage around. Because if you leave the shutter on too long, then if there's a little breeze, all your branches and everything are blurry too. So that's kind of, I don't think that's happened here though. It looks like this is maybe a 10 or 15 second shot. It just needs more contrast and to be a little bit warmer. And the horizon looks crooked. And that's the problem with like shots like this when they're when it's hard to get your perspective straight because you're pointing up. So the horizon looks crooked, but it's actually probably leveled this right, but I would artificially level this a little bit more. Like that. And yeah, if we tried to do any perspective correction, it would just mess up the shot. But now it just needs some contrast. So let's take some of the blacks back in. Bring the whites right about, oh no, that's too much. Just a touch. Yeah, maybe they left the ibis on while they're on a tripod. It's possible, but I think it's possible. But I think it's just cropped in a lot because the dimensions are, it's like it's been cropped down to like 5 megapixels. So I think that's all it is, but we can add some sharpness back in. And let's see. Yeah, I don't have a reference point for the horizon, so I'm just kind of visually doing it because these trees up here are just a little bit too crooked. So like this is, yeah, it's hard. It's tough to level. It's just a guess on my part. And I'd probably cut out this tree here. I don't feel like this tree helps. So I hate to do it, but I'd hate, yeah, there's no metadata on this. The top of the frame is hot. Really? This part up here? Yeah, I was gonna crop anyway, but I wasn't thinking about cropping that out too much. But I would just crop out that tree and maybe this tree. That might be too much. That still works. Kind of. No, we're kind of missing. That kind of works. I might have to bring in a little bit of this tree back in. Just enough. So I can get a little bit of the top of the waterfall. I hate to lose that. I think that's what I would do. And let me put the whites back where they were. Now I would just warm it up. I would crop out all of the green in the left corner. Well, then we're at almost a vertical shot. So maybe a vertical. We'll try a vertical. Lane, you put vignettes on everything. It just needs to be a little bit warmer. Because this part of the thing is in the shade. Oh, that's no magenta. It doesn't need magenta. But yeah. How about a little bit of green? Yeah, that looks good. Yeah, the waterfall doesn't stand out with all the snow. Yeah, you're right, Plato. This stands out. Maybe a vertical though. Let's just try vertical. I think, and then I need to bring it back. Yeah, the vertical kind of works too. I like the landscape a little bit better myself. But yeah, this is the vertical, but I prefer the landscape personally. Like I said, it's very subjective. The link to the woodland photography that I put in the form. Oh, that's right. Yeah, you just put a video up. I haven't had a chance to watch that, but I did see you put a post in. Um, yeah, point of interest in the image would help. Definitely. But I would crop the landscape to about right here on that side and cut out this weird tree over here. I kind of like this better than the vertical myself. Rick, you like the vertical better. I like the landscape better. But we'll go back to vertical. Rick has a better eye than me, so I'll follow Rick's advice. Where's my vertical shot? So I'll move this over. Everyone likes the vertical better. How about right there? All right, and then let's do a comparison. So that's what I would do. I like the landscape better, but yeah, the vertical works. So we have the vertical, and I just warmed it up a bit, that's all. Because it's just too cold on the left. I don't like cold, so I have to warm things up. But maybe leaving it kind of on the cool side would be better for this kind of shot because it is cold. Maybe crop out the stones in the bottom. No, I like the stones down here. But okay, let's move on. But I think there's some good tips there. It matches the top of the picture better when it's warm. Yeah, I think so. But it's kind of like that mood. I mean, I like the warmer picture myself better. But some people might argue that it's cold there. You want it to have kind of a cooler tone. But it's all preference, right? It's all very subjective. Okay, let's try the next one. You like the warm one too, John? Yeah, me too. Ooh, okay. This is a good shot. Must be a high aperture. Let me see. F5. No, it's not. But why is there all these spots here? Wow. Maybe shooting through a window. Oh, it's snowing. Okay, duh. So if we look at the full image, now it looks like it's snowing. When I was looking at it in the window, it looked like sensor spots or something, but it's not. It's actually starting to snow. I think that's what's going on. Wow, what would I do here though? I don't think there's anything I can do. I like the cemetery down here. There's always a cemetery next to a church, right? And the skyline is beautiful here. I think maybe a little bit of the haze to bring that out more. Oh, Paul said, oh, this is Paul's picture. He said it was raining. Okay. But I would definitely just mess with the clarity a little. I'm sorry, the haze. just so hopefully we can see some of that in the background a little better. Because I really love this mountain. And then, man, I wish I could just brush in a little bit of brown right here. That would look so good. But let's play with the curves a little bit, just to bring in the rain. Where's my curve thing here? Let's do that. I don't think we need any on this side. Just a tiny bit. Just a little bit of an S curve. So I really want to try and bring this out in here. Let me see if I can just crank it up. No, God, that was awful. Too much. Maybe just a -2. Yeah, right. Right about there. And then just a tad on the warmth. Maybe a half, like, ooh, no, like 0.2. A little bit more magenta. Spot remove the largest spot near the tower. Oh, this spot here, I think you're talking about this one. This one does kind of draw the eye, doesn't it? So I can try that. Let me get a decent size, decent blur. Why did that? Let me try again. That didn't work too well. Try a little smaller brush. Maybe you're on this side instead. Come on. Okay. I think that's all I would do. So let's compare. If you guys have any suggestions, just throw them out now while we're looking at this. But what I wanted to do is bring more of the background in, you know, up here. So that was basically done with the haze. Just add a tiny bit of warmth because, you know, it's kind of sunsetty looking. So I wanted to bring in a little bit of warmth, and I think that'll do it. Okay. And then play with the curves a little bit. Bob says crop out the left edge. The left edge. Really? Hold on. I don't see anything to crop out here on the left. How much are you talking about cropping out? I mean, there's a little blue thing here. I mean, the only cropping I might do is make this wide, but I don't think there's enough detail in the shot to make it a super wide shot. Tight up against the tower. All right, I'll try it. I don't think that's going to work, but I can do that. Maybe. I don't think that helps a lot. If you crop the left, you would have to crop the bottom. Yeah, a little bit, but you know, there's not much going on the bottom. But I think I like it wider. I mean, if I was going to crop it all, it doesn't need to be cropped. Let me just, in my opinion. But if I was going to crop, I would crop it wide like this. Maybe, that's not quite right. Maybe a little bit wider. Yeah, no, I think the original image was perfect. I don't think it really needed any cropping at all. I think just like this is perfect because we see a little bit of the graveyard down here. We see the full length of the church. And yeah, I like a little bit of breathing room on the left side. And then the sunset coming in, it just needed a tiny bit of warmth. Maybe 0.3. Yeah, just a tiny bit, but I think that's perfect right there. Yeah, good shot, Paul. Let's move on to the next one. Oh, this is cool. I like this. Whose is this? This is, oh, John Rayner. Okay. I would definitely crop in though. I don't feel like this part adds much to the image. I really like all the shadows and the steps here. So, wow. Let me see. I like all this down in here the most. It's not quite, I think the vertical is better. I would just get less of the, maybe just a little bit tighter. Bob's asking, why do I crop on the preset sizes and not freehand? Just because it's easier to print, because paper comes in all these various sizes that usually match the presets. That's all. So if I ever plan to print like at home, uh, then I prefer using the preset crops. So 4x6 is very common, right? Uh, 1x1. But when you start freehand the cropping, then you have to kind of customize your printing and your framing. So I just, it's just habit. There's no reason to not crop it any way you want, really, but I like to use presets just for printing at home. But Rick thinks the original without any cropping works. I suppose. Where's Why isn't this uncropping original? There we go. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's really a nice shot. It really does. Yeah, Rick's right. It doesn't need any cropping either. I just feel like there's a little bit of out of balance here because this top part here is is little, just the symmetry, right? Just how I am with architectural photography. I like symmetry. It's just sort of my trade. So this part here, having this space up here, but then none down here, really bugs me. Um, yeah, if there was a person walking up these stairs, that would be way cool, right? That's when you bring a friend with you and you say, "Hey, go walk up these stairs," if you're allowed to, right? Uh, Me personally, though, I am just simply a geometry guy, a symmetry guy. I can't deal with this empty space at the top here. This balance. Right there would work for me. See, to me, this is a better image for me. because now I have equal spacing on the bottom and the top. But everyone else seems to like it the way it is, right? As is the original crop. So excellent shot. Excellent shot. Nothing to do. Except I would balance it just for the symmetry. Because even this, let me check something. See, even this bar is slightly, I would have cut this bar in half instead of right on this angle. So if I was cropping, oh my God, let me just fix it the way I would do it. Even though it's probably a worse image. I would crop this right on the center. Right there. Yeah, that's what I would do with the image, but that's just how I would do it. But okay, let's move on. It's a really good, it's a really good image though. Try a square and stop at the right end of this stair shadow. Yeah, I could see that, squaring it off where the shadows are. But I think the the portrait, or the portrait shot was definitely a stronger image than any cropping. But I like a little more symmetry in my shots. And speaking of symmetry, look at this tree. This looks like somebody just took the tree and flipped it in half. In fact, I'm pretty sure that's what's going on. This is a mirror image. I mean, these tree shots always have like, always nice with a little bit of mist and yeah, I don't think there's anything to change here because we got perfect symmetry. And it looks like it's a square shot. I think. Let me see if it's a 1x1. Almost perfectly square. I would have made it perfectly square. That's it. A little bit on the right here. I thought so. There. Um, so I think a square shot rather than being slightly off. That's all I would change here. I mean, I could play with the curves a little bit, but that might be futile. Looking at this histogram, everything is got is perfect. Yeah, there's nothing to even do in the curves. I wouldn't change anything. Nice shot. Other than it being a blatant mirror image, you know, kind of an artificial shot, I think this tree might have been more interesting. I mean, I wasn't there. I don't know what was on the right or left side of the tree that you wanted to just make a mirror image, but um, I would have rather personally had a more natural tree image than uh, a mirror image that was flipped. All right, I think that's it. That's the last one. Any opinions on this one? Did you get 5 bars? I don't know what you guys are talking about now. But okay, I think that's all I would do is just square this off. But yeah, awesome images this week as always. See, if I had to pick my favorite shot, let me see. Out of all these shots, yeah, it looks artificial, right? I would have rather had the more natural look, Plato. I agree with you. I feel like doing that symmetry thing. I mean, if you did like a kaleidoscope of that tree, that's, you know, and really forced it to be artificial, I think that would have been more interesting than just doing a one-off mirror, like one mirror shot of it. I would have rather done that, a kaleidoscope if you're going to do that. Uh, Man, my favorite image that I'm kind of torn between John's shot here and the old lady shot. I mean, they were all really good, but these two kind of stand out to me. I mean, they're very different shots. So I'd say that I would say it was a tie because they're not the same thing, right? The one with the stairs, yeah. But yeah, all of them really good shots. I love the church and the seascape, the city shot over there with all the crops and everything. Um, yeah, good shots, everybody. Thanks for sending those in. Okay, so we will be back on Sunday, and same time, like 9:30 ish or 10, unless I wake up really late. But I'll post the link up, and you guys can submit pictures again. And thanks for coming in. I appreciate everyone's time and on a Thursday. You guys are always awesome, and I love the feedback you gave on the images. What I'd like to do is, if there's a way I could zoom everybody in, like on a Zoom conference call, and just have you guys chatting live instead of just me jibber jabbering the whole time. But uh, you guys have a good evening. Thanks for coming in.